Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2, Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Barbara Rainey. Barbara has been, she has been around off-road a long time. We got acquainted doing the Reno Rocks event, and we will discuss that. We'll discuss being the managing partner, office manager, the Offroad Hall of Fame, and Barbara's significant impact there. So, Barbara, let's go ahead and get started. And where did you grow up?
Well, hi, Rich, and
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you. Yes, I've been around a long time, as Dave Cole likes to say, since Barbara's been around off-road since wheels were square. So I am a Southern California beach girl, grew up there in the 70s, and probably the thing that defines me the most is just I like wide open spaces. I want to see what's over the next horizon. Always leaning in, pushing ahead, wanting to see what's next. Grew up riding horses through the hills, body surfing at the beach, and pretty much, everybody says, wow, you must have been rich to live there. No, it was just a good time to be in Southern California in the 60s and 70s in Orange County and Laguna, San Juan area. It was just magical. And I lived near Orange County Raceway. Couldn't explain why. Wasn't from a car family. My dad drove a Corvair and was an aerospace engineer, but I just wanted to go to the races. So I showed up at Orange County Raceway one day in my teens, wound up working in the souvenir stand, and so that's how I got my start in racing, was at Orange County International Raceway in the 70s.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. I knew that you got involved in racing, but I didn't realize it was from the souvenir stand.
Well, that's the great place to start in the marketing, and then I worked into working in the timing tower and ran the telewriter. If you're you work at a drag strip and the cars go down the quarter mile, somebody has to write down the times and the speeds, and then this fancy little old antiquated machine would mimic what I wrote up in the tower and take it down to the other end, and the guys would pick up their timing slips at the other end from the booth. So got to do a lot there and really got my boots on the ground education in marketing. Learned from some of the greats. I worked for Charlie Allen and Bill Donor and my friend Lynn Rose. We worked side by side at the raceway and put on events like the Bug-Ins and the Fox Hunts and the 64 Funny Cars and Manufacturers Championships and anybody that grew up in Southern California in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that was the place to be, and those were the events to be at. And so I got a real education on operations and marketing from my experience there, and that's where I met my husband, too. So that was kind of fun.
Excellent. And your husband is David?
Right. You can't talk about Trail Mom without talking about Recovery Dave. My husband was stationed at the USMC El Toro, which was right next to OCIR. And actually, we met over a Jeep pickup truck, which is kind of funny. One of the companies I worked for had a pickup truck for sale, a Jeep truck in the 70s, and our chief starter, Smitty, Ron Smith, told David he was Smitty was a gunnery sergeant at the Marine base, and then he worked over at the track. And he told David there was this girl that had a pickup truck for sale, and flash forward 42 years, and we're still together and still at the races.
So not only did he pick up the truck, but he picked up you?
You know, he didn't buy the truck, but he got the girl. So I don't know if he wonders if that was a good decision or not. He might be wishing he had that old J10 back.
Oh, that's awesome. How long were you there at the Orange County Raceway?
Yeah, I was there. You know, we were there 5 or 6 years. You know, unfortunately, one of the hallmarks of any kind of racing, and it's a thread through everything we do, is land use issues, and, you know, it just got too expensive to keep the track going. So the track closed in '83. We did World Finals there, and before the track closed, I kind of went and looked for some other things to do, answered a blind ad in the Orange County Register. And anybody remembers going to the classified ads to find your jobs. And it turned out to be Stadium Motorsports. And Stadium Motorsports were the producers of Supercross. And that was Mike Goodwin, and that was in Laguna Beach. So that took me on my next journey around the country putting on Supercross. And I'm still friends with my boss, John Bradley, to this day. Doing television back in the early 80s was kind of hysterical to try to do things. You know, character generation was just coming in. We didn't have computers. We just barely got computers, and we had all kinds of crazy ways to try to communicate and put on events across the country. And then through that, I had the privilege and the honor of working for Mickey and Trudy Thompson in the Grand National Sport Truck Series, Mickey Thompson's Stadium Truck Series, and we would go around the country and put on those events. One of people today, I mean, it's just hard to even comprehend how you would put on an event, and we'd get to a city, Rich, and you'd get your hotel room, and in your hotel room was a list of things you needed to do. Remember, there's no computers, there's no cell phones, nothing. So you'd have a list, and to me it was kind of like a scavenger hunt. And you'd have a list and a roll of frickin' quarters for the payphone, and you couldn't spend any money. The trick back then is you had this massive stadium that seated 80,000 people. Well, you knew you weren't going to sell 80,000 seats, so you'd have to go out and find what you needed, but you would trade VIP tickets. Your list might say, find cars for King Kong, the monster truck, to crush. So you got to go to a junkyard and you know, drive around in your rental car with your roll of quarters, and you find cars and you trade the guy at the car salvage company some tickets, and then you have to find carpet to put the cars on in the stadium because they won't let you put the cars on their concrete. So then you got to go to a carpet company and find some carpet and trade them some tickets. And, you know, so on and on and on, and the mechanics of putting on these events, kind of in the dark ages. But boy, it was fun and it was an adventure.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know how that all worked back then. And it's intriguing because putting on events now, it's a lot easier when we can just look everything up on a computer or on a cell phone and then make the calls. I mean, everybody complains about Google knowing everything, but without Google knowing everything, it would make my job a lot harder.
Right. Now now the challenge to me is editing things out. You have access to anything and everything, and so how do you refine that into something that is succinct and makes sense and tells your message? And then it's also a challenge for all the businesses too. You know, how do you cut through all the noise? And then when you establish something, things are a moving target a lot faster now. You know, just about the time you get the hang of frickin' Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, then here comes, you know, TikTok and all these other platforms. So, and then do you chase them, or do you know, when is the timing right? So the challenges are different, but there are people in our industry, which is the thing I love about our industry, is the people. You know, they're certainly up to the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of us have picked or chosen this industry because of the people, the relationships. You know, one of the reoccurring themes in all of these podcasts that I've done so far is that everybody talks about, the people they get to hang out with. And it is so true from our side of it, dealing with the racers, dealing with our marketing partners and advertisers, and dealing with the spectators and the property owners and the manufacturers and everything. It's just absolutely a phenomenal business to be in, or an industry to be in, if you can create it into a lifestyle.
Yes. The people in off-road, and again, that's what draws me to it. After I worked for Mickey and Trudy and we moved to Reno, Nevada for my husband's work, and we're still here. And so I kind of stepped back a little bit, and we got more into recreational off-road. We're blessed to be right here by the Rubicon and the Black Rock Desert and Fordyce, and we can, I can go out the back door, and there's a wild horse eating right outside my house right now. So the kind of that don't fence me in spirit of the West. The people of off-road I always like to say they're innovators and instigators, they're aggravators and agitators. To me, it's the spirit that settled this country and won world wars. And, sometimes the best of us is the worst of us, and obviously there are situations where that rears its head. But in general, these are people who are pushing forward and trying to make something happen. One of my favorite stories when I took over the Hall of Fame is we have the yellow Class 8 Chevy of Parnelli Jones and Walker Evans. And that truck won everything back in the day, and they actually moved it up a class because they just couldn't believe that it was unbeatable. And, somebody sent me of course, usually your dissenters send you anonymous messages, I haven't got to tell you in person, but I had somebody send me a note and say, that's a cheater truck. And so I looked into it and researched it, and, you can look at it one of two ways. If it's your truck, it's innovation. You're pushing the envelope. And that's another hallmark of off-roaders. They're always pushing the frickin' envelope,
Yes.
And sometimes that gets annoying. So this truck, yes, it pushed the envelope, and it was an innovative truck. If it's your truck, if it's beating you all the time, yeah, it's a cheater, because you haven't figured out how to innovate around it. And that's, you look at rock crawling and off-road and even recreational wheeling. Every day there's somebody looking at a Jeep or a Taco or a Toyota and saying, what can I do to make this better? Ultra 4, look at Ultra 4. My goodness, just since 2007, when it was a bunch of, a few home-built buggies and a few Jeeps, and look at where it's gone in the innovation. And then that provides thousands of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs. It fuels our economy, so all these innovations and these innovators, there's some failures, and people have fun with, calling them overlanders and snorkels and light bars and whatever. But you know what? There are so many positives that outweigh any of the negatives. That's what I choose to look at and to applaud and to highlight. We don't need any more critics.
True. You have to be one of the most positive, upbeat, and love everyone person that I know. I've never,
people like that.
I've never heard you talk ill about anybody in our industry. It always amazes me. You have so many friends, and everybody really does look up to you that has ever met you and is amazed. But you're just so kind, and having to deal with everybody that you deal with, I have to give you like the biggest gold star ever.
I'll pin it right to my straitjacket here in the sanitarium at the Offroad Hall of Fame. No, so here's how I feel about that, and we have talked about that in the past. There is a special place in heaven for race promoters. Unfortunately, most of the time it looks like hell, because until you have been in those shoes and seen what people have done, anybody that's out there in the world trying to do something positive, if you're not going to get in there and help them, the least you can do is get out of the way, you know?
Right.
And maybe it's because I'm an old person now, but, you know, my youthful exuberance took me to a lot of wonderful things and places and all that energy. And I also made some epic mistakes too, you know, and, but you don't have the success without the failure. You know, you go back to the old baseball batting average, you know, even if you're the, you know, the home run king, you still struck out 50% of the time. So I look at the people who are willing to stick their neck out there to do things for us so that we can enjoy what we love to do. Like, look what Dave's going through with King of the Hammers right now, just trying to put on an event. Look at all the stuff you and Shelley do and did for your love of rock crawling with traveling the country for We Rock. You know, people see the podiums and they see the exciting part. They don't see you guys at the truck stops in the middle of the night or after all the spectators leave and there's 50 frickin' course flags up on that hill that need to come down and be carted down to the truck and packed up. And, you know, there are a lot of people who want the glory, but there are not many people who are willing to put in the work. And usually the people who are putting in the work aren't really doing it to seek the glory. They're doing it because of the love of what they do. And they just you almost can't help yourself, you know, and I kind of look at the Hall of Fame that way. And I hope we can talk more about the Hall of Fame than about me because, you know, that's far more interesting.
Oh, the Hall of Fame, we'll get into the Hall of Fame deeply, but, you know, your background is substantial. Like I said, the number of people that you know, even before you started in the Off-Road Hall of Fame, was just absolutely incredible. And the impact that you've made to people's lives, everybody that I know that has met you would say it, that, you know, it's been phenomenal. So let's continue.
I didn't know this is your life, Barbara Rainey. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
No worries, but it's all comes from the heart. It really does.
Right.
So,
well, you kind of start looking back and you see, you know, like when I stopped working for the event business, I made a conscious decision to stay home and raise my kids. We've always been recreational off-roaders, always, since we met. And my husband, we still have our 1970 CJ6. We still have our 1942 flat fender that we would take the family through the Rubicon in the 80s. We look kind of like the Clampetts going to Beverly Hills because we'd have a family of four in the fully aired flat fender on 31s, you know, with the 10 on the top and the kids in the car seats. And so I've spent over 40 years, you know, on the trails, loving the American West. And off-road is the way that we get out there and we're able to enjoy it.
Yes, so true. And with that, when was the first time that you ran the Rubicon?
Maybe 1986.
Okay.
You know, that was a century ago, it seems like.
Yeah. I started running that area in 83. So
yeah. And I'd always heard so much about it. I thought it was life-threatening. It's actually just rig-threatening. You know, if you're not dumb. You know, my husband did have to rip the door off the outhouse once back in the 80s to make a backboard for a guy whose rig had backed off a little sluice or something and gone down a hill. But, you know, the Rubicon is an amazing experience, but it's the people you meet. It's being on the trail. It's that self-reliance and independence and that spirit of being able to fix it. Our friend Tim Albaniano, we met him in there in the late 80s. We saw Tim welding a drive shaft for a guy with two batteries in line wearing two pairs of sunglasses. Now, unless you're of a certain age, you can't appreciate that was like seeing the Holy Grail. You just couldn't believe that somebody could do that.
Absolutely correct.
You know, now you just pop the hood, you got your portable welder, you put on your shield, and down the road you go. But, there are new challenges and things that are of a different kind. They're more on the side of, loving places to death and taking, what to do with human waste and overuse and those types of things, because the technology now allows people to get out in greater numbers and do all the things that in the old days were pretty unheard of.
Yeah, you can buy a vehicle right now for the first time as a newbie and have all the things that you had to build up to. And that's one thing the manufacturers and the aftermarket has done really well is looked at the end user, whether it's a racer or an extreme wheeler, what they've done to their vehicle to make it so capable. And now the manufacturers are doing that from the factory.
Right. Well, it's kind of come down to the point that these days, in the old days, the strongest link was the resourceful guy behind the wheel who had to know where to place the tires, how to maintain your vehicle, what you could do with what you had. And now it's almost like, I'm probably going to make some enemies, but I think the weakest link is the person behind the wheel almost anymore, because the vehicles are so capable, and they can get people in more trouble, and they can get people into places they shouldn't be. And we really need to educate people on proper ways to do things, and I'm thinking the recreational side, because we don't want more places shut down. That's the last thing we need, and that's been the trend for the first 50 years of the sport. And so we kind of are dedicating ourselves to that kind of education as well.
Absolutely. I think that even the proliferation of UTVs it's been great for the off-road market, but it's also been detrimental. Without the manufacturers having some kind of a program in place to teach the new enthusiasts trail etiquette and the environmental concerns that we all share, that creates chaos in a lot of areas. And I'm just hoping that somehow we can get manufacturers involved in looking at the end use of their vehicles a little bit more than just as soon as somebody writes that check and they get handed the keys, that they're no longer under the care or guidance of the manufacturers.
Correct. And with the side-by-sides, then you have all the trailers and the tow rigs. So let's say 30 of your friends are going to go on a side-by-side run. You have to have a place to park 30 trucks and trailers. I mean, so there's all kinds of, blessings and challenges that come with this new innovation. The Hall of Fame, we believe so strongly in this that I don't know when this is airing, but probably not before King of the Hammers next week. We're actually partnering with Tread Lightly as one of their partners, and then we're going to give them, last year, 2020, holy mackerel, was not a lot of fun here at the Hall of Fame, but we did it anyway, and we went through it, and we're tough, and we're going to get through it, but we were not able to have our induction ceremony, and I want to talk about that with you. But we felt strongly that we wanted to continue our support and do some of our other things. So every year we give a land use award. We take a percentage of our partnerships and we award those to a land use organization. And in the past, last year it was given to the Red Rock four-wheelers, their multiple use defense fund. As you know, Red Rock four-wheelers, they run Moab Easter Jeep, and they have a great multiple-use defense fund where they go out and fix trails and make sure they're safe. The year before, we gave it to the Friends of Oceano Dunes, who are fighting the battle to keep the dunes open. In 2017, we gave it to Corva and the San Diego Off-Road Coalition. In 2016, we gave that award to Blue Ribbon. And then this year, for 2020, we'll be presenting that at King of the Hammers to Tread Lightly. We'll be giving them our land use donation and give them a big check.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Great. So let's go ahead and get started to 2010 when
2009.
Was it 9? Oh, my Lord.
9.
9. Okay, let's go back to that.
Oh, my gosh.
Geez, see, I'm getting too old for this stuff. And I didn't keep good notes, and most of the history that I had that was it destroyed. So let's
all right.
let's go into 2009 and talk about how it all came about to have a rock crawling event downtown, or really close to downtown Reno.
So I kind of melded two things. When we moved to Reno and I got out of working in the actual industry in 1983, I started working at the Sands Hotel Casino in Reno and did advertising, marketing, events. And we had a Reno Sparks Special Events Committee that came up with things like the air races, balloon races, rib cook-off, chili cook-off, hot August nights. So we had this great series of citywide events, and the concept was all of the casinos and the convention authority, and the city of Reno, we all had a stakeholder, and we would meet and we would cooperate to put on these great events. And the city would cooperate on the permit side, and the Convention and Visitors Authority would throw their marketing dollars and promotion behind it, and all the casinos would put up prizes in rooms. And it was a great day of cooperation. You could really see what happened when people work together, and there's a little lesson there for my wish for the off-road community too. So we came up with all these great events. And then I was on a trail run in 2008. I was at the High Lows Poker Run, one of the longest running events out here in the West, on the Deer Valley Trail. And I'm bouncing up the trail in the CJ6 with the T111 transfer case, so it's kind of like a four-wheel drive tractor. And I'm thinking, maybe we could do a rock crawl in Reno. And I thought, wow, we could put rocks down Virginia Street under the Reno Arch. We could have Southern rock bands playing in Harris Plaza. We could have rock light parades up the street. And then we could build a rock crawling course in the Sands parking lot. And then we would do that through this Reno Sparks Special Events Committee, and it would start a new citywide event. And so I thought that would be great. So I pitched it to the owners, but the general manager at the time didn't want to share it. Lesson number 1, he didn't want to give it to anybody else or have anybody else help us. So he said, yeah, I want to do it, but I don't want to do it the way you wanted to do it. I want you to do it, and I don't want you to do it with any support from anybody else in the community or any of the other, So he basically said, sure, you can do it, and then took away my toolkit. So I said, okay, now what do I do? So we had worked with some fabulous people, and I have to tell you that working with like Bob and Stacy, Frank, from over in Orville, and all the people, if anybody's listening to this that helped with Reno Rocks, you all know who you are. And so that was the name I came up with, was Reno Rocks. And again, I played around with a lot of names, and that's the one that I settled on. And so we came, and then I knew of We Rock, and so I approached you, and I actually drove down to Placerville to see you and Rich in 2008, end of the year. It was a tough time for you and your family, and you were very gracious to me despite all you were going through. And we decided, yeah, we'll do it. And so then we had to come up to speed on how the heck do you do this. So we decided on hay bales and shotcrete. Yeah, there you go. Everybody else is laughing at your laugh too. But we did it. And we partnered with Pirate 4x4. Mind you, this is before really you had social media. Facebook was kind of brand new, but nobody knew how to use it yet. So forums were still the thing. So we pushed it out through Pirate 4x4. And again, another innovation. You can't appreciate how hard it was back then, looking at how it's still hard now. It's just they make it look easy. to stream something. So we decided to stream it live. Camo and Lance were still at Pirate. I think it was Camo that told me he would do the event live if I gave him the penthouse and a life-size Captain Morgan statue. So I'm like, okay. Luckily, I have a friend who has a liquor distributor. Thank you, Scary Gary. You know who you are. He came up with I went over to his place, took a picture of the life-size Captain Morgan statue and said, game on to Lance and Camo. And then we had some other great video partners, and we streamed Reno Rocks live around the world. We had the guys from Japan came over. Jeff Mello won with Dave Cole spotting for him, and it was Jeff Mello's 100th win. Dustin Webster was there. Shannon Campbell was there. And what I thought was great about Reno Rocks is it really embraced the lifestyle. You know, to that point, most events are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Well, we had the infamous, we had pool parties, we had bikini contests. After seeing what Camo was doing with those dollar bills, I immediately stopped sending my kids to school with ones for lunch money.
Oh, this is great.
We premiered the second King of the Hammers movie, the second Crusade. I didn't know Jeff and Dave at that point, but I called them up and said, hey, we're doing this event, and I want to do premiere your movie. And so we premiered the second Crusade in the ballroom on 4 big screens, and we had the bars across the hall. The biggest mistake I made was not enough bartenders. I had no idea.
I'm surprised you guys had enough booze.
Oh, my God. Well, I don't think we would have had enough booze if we'd had enough bartenders. We just couldn't push it out fast enough. And then, of course, we all remember the penthouse parties after the parties.
Oh, wow. Do we?
And Kevin Carey, Lance Clifford, and Camo taking over the stage with the live band and their impromptu version of Highway to Hell. Yeah, there were some great memories. There were some rough patches along the way. Getting rid of all that stuff from Reno Rocks, the trucking company broke the hay bales apart, and they fluff up.
Yes.
And so they charged me by the truckload to get rid of that stuff. And they made sure it was as fluffy as possible. So, and then we had the hydro barriers, the water barriers, which Mickey Thompson invented those. I have some great Mickey Thompson stories too. So when the event was over, after we got Dustin Webster off the course because the insurance guy was hyperventilating, they were playing around afterwards. Anyway, somebody pulled the plugs on all of the hydro barriers all at the same time, and we basically flooded 2nd Street. It ran, all the water went, across out the parking lot and off the other side. So, when you put on an event, people think of the fun side, but, it really it's insurance companies fighting over who's going to be listed first. It's permits, it's trash, it's toilets. My success formula for a successful event is you can do anything if you have trash and toilets and boobs and beer. And it doesn't matter what the event is after doing this for 40 plus years. So, but that's, Reno Rocks I just thank everybody that participated. And, but what happened was because the general manager made that cornerstone decision to have us 4-wall it ourselves, we lost a significant amount of money on the event because there were no other partners and no other support. And while they were really delighted with the outcome and there was a lot of positives, about that time, the effects of the economic crash in 2008,
Yep, the housing market.
The wave rolled over the sands, and we had actually been purchased by the Herbst family. their bank pulled their line of credit and said, nope, you're not going to be doing anything anywhere. And then the sands actually went back to the banks that owned it. So that kind of put a stop to that. And it's funny, you have a vision for something and it doesn't turn out anything like your vision, but it still turns out pretty cool. And I think anybody that wants to do something like that has to look at that. And things kind of have a life of their own. If you feel called to do something, by goodness, go give it a shot. It's better to try it and go down in flames than to wonder your whole life, what if, I have a little saying on my desk that says, the little engine that coulda, shoulda, woulda,
Right.
And, you don't get very far that way. So you got to be willing to get out there and fight for what you believe in and support the things that you believe in, and then get out of the way of the people whose dreams are different than yours.
Very true. So you mentioned, by the way, that event is probably the one event, and it's not just because of the rock crawl, but because of the show and shine and the pool party and the bar parties and the after parties and everything that was involved with that weekend was makes it the one event that will always stand out in my memory as being the top.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We all did it together. Again, it goes back to that thing about working together and everybody having a shared love for something. You don't always agree. You don't always get your way. But in the end, when you're doing something because you love it and you have a passion for it, it'll turn out okay.
I agree with you 100%. And one thing I can say is I was absolutely shocked that we didn't get closed down Saturday night by the SWAT teams or local law enforcement somehow, because that casino hotel was the stories that everybody could tell from that night would fill volumes of books that nobody should ever read.
Right. And so here's a little behind the scenes thing. There's noise permits. You got to be done by 10. It's like, okay, we'll be done by 10. So you're trying to get a bunch of these guys to stop making noise by 10. And there was that apartment building on Arlington that looked down, a big, tall apartment building. And there was a guy in one of those apartments. Lots of people watched it from there. But there was a guy that lived there, and he didn't like the noise. And so he had my cell number. And at 10:01, he would call the cops, and then he would call me. And, all the kind of fun things that you get to go through. But it's worth it. Now it's worth it. Back then, I was curled up in the fetal position, just trying to... Where's Barbara? She's behind the bleachers, breathing into a paper bag. Yeah, because, there's herding cats, and then there's herding rock crawlers or off-roaders. And they are a whole different breed of cat, let me tell you.
Yeah, because it's basically a bunch of cats that are in heat.
Right. Well, I started with race car drivers and rodeo riders and truck drivers. So off-road to me, it's my family, and I love them all differently. So they're just, I don't know, like we talked about. Reno Rocks was one for the record books. I'm sorry we didn't get to do it again. If anybody, goes out there and looks around, there's videos on YouTube and lots of pictures online, and thank heavens, lots of pictures that aren't online.
Yeah, hopefully a lot of photographs. The memory cards or phones have been destroyed.
Right. Something about ripping sleeves off of shirts and arm wrestling competitions on overturned tables in hotel suites, and
all the plants and furniture that were in those little entry rooms. that you'd step out of the elevator and there was always, a
right.
table with plants or something on it, and then like a couple of chairs or a couch. All of those got changed and disappeared. Oh, my
Right.
Lord. I think the
Well,
funniest part of that was the bikers that were on the same floor as the rock crawlers.
yeah, they didn't know what to do with that. And any of you who are in the hospitality industry who are listening, we have mellowed considerably.
Yes. Yes, we
Most
have.
of us can't even stay up till that 10 o'clock curfew.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true.
Yeah.
So look,
Good time for
yes,
sure.
absolutely. Let's talk. Let's do talk about Mickey Thompson.
Well, I got to know Mickey and Trudy through, like I said, working. So I was lucky enough to be on the road crew. I didn't work in the office, but I would fly out to cities a week in advance, and I would do the advance work and do things like set up the office in the stadium office and do promotion and make sure all of the boots on the ground thing were done. Like I mentioned, we had to find, your list would say find cars for King Kong to crush, find someone to sing the Canadian national anthem. That was fun because we had a Canadian driver. And mind you, you don't have a computer, you don't have a cell phone, you have a roll of quarters and a telephone. So I found someone who could sing, but nobody knew the words to "Oh Canada" or how to sing it. And you can't just go to YouTube or you can't go to Spotify or Pandora and listen to the Canadian national anthem. So the only thing I could think of was calling the Canadian consulate to get the words and find somebody to sing it to me and have this guy who was going to sing it listen. But the person I was talking to was French Canadian and their primary language was French. So their English was poor and my English isn't good on a good day. So I remember spending quite a bit of time trying to get the words to "Oh Canada," and we pulled it off. I don't know how we did it, but we sang the Canadian national anthem. But back to Mickey Thompson. Mickey Thompson was a dreamer. He was an innovator. He was kind of like that home run hitter. He struck out a lot, and he had a lot of spectacular successes. He was such an innovator. If you look back at the vehicles that he built, Rory Ward, one of our board members, has the Challenger 4, the yellow one. And then even back to, his son Danny Thompson in the speed records. So here are people who are always innovating, always thinking. We're lucky enough at the Hall of Fame, we just got donated to us Mickey Thompson's course marking buggy. So when you would go out to mark courses, this is the little buggy he would take out to mark the courses. It's not worth a lot as far as, value as far as itself as a vehicle, but the provenance behind it that it's actually Mickey Thompson's vehicle. And it's got, his history behind it. Dick Landfield, one of the most amazing people ever in the sport of off-road that I could talk about for hours and hours, is one of our board members, and he just donated it to us. So Mickey was a great guy. He innovated lots of things like the water barricades, which I think at some point got him in trouble with the construction concrete mafia people. I'm not sure. Matter of fact, I don't even want to speak about that because I don't know for sure. But regardless, he was always trying to innovate things. And so when we first started doing the events in the football stadiums and put the water barricades out, the racing wasn't very good because if you got the whole shot and you got the inside line, it was kind of a done deal. It was it. So he came up with this series of metal ramps. Now this is before they, I don't know why he tried to do it without putting dirt in the stadiums like we did for Supercross and like what they did at the Coliseum. He did it in the Coliseum, he did it on dirt, but maybe he was trying to find a less expensive way to do it or a more efficient way. So he would just leave the stadium floor as the concrete and put the hydro barriers up. And then he thought, okay, I'm going to make a series of ramps and of metal ramps. So if you have the inside line, you have the highest jump. So you're off the ground the longest and you lose traction and you slow down. And then there's a middle ramp that's a little less high, and then there's a lower ramp on the outside, and then on the far outside it was just down to the concrete. So you could take the far outside line and not have to do a jump, but you were on the outside. And his goal was to make the racing more competitive and more interesting. So he put these metal ramps on the floor, and then the drivers would try, test them. Well, the ramps slid on the asphalt or the concrete. They wouldn't stay in place. So then he had to rig a series of cables to hold the ramps down. And I think he tied them to the hydro barriers or something. But anyway, then he had to test the new system with the ramps with the cables. And mind you, I'm hanging banners. I'm going to digress for a second. The suckiest job ever was being banner girl for Supercross or Mickey Thompson Stadium Series, because you didn't just go out and get a banner printed. They were freaking hand painted, and they were expensive, and everybody wanted their banner back. And it was also before kill seats. So the first thing people would do after the race is they'd pull the banners over the sides as souvenirs. And I'm trying to run around a football stadium getting the banners back before the people steal them. So anyway, so I'm hanging banners around the stadium doing something. And I hear this god-awful squealing of tires. And I look up, and here comes Mickey Thompson in a Lincoln Town Car running the course through the stadium to test those cables to see if they'll break. Figured if the town car wouldn't break them, then for sure a buggy or a stadium truck, one of the little Toyotas, wouldn't break them. So Mickey is wheeling this town car through the stadium course and doing the jumps, and sparks are flying. And I mean, everybody stopped and had their mouth open. I know I did. And it was just like, I think it's to this day my favorite off-road moment. Until he was done and the ramps held and the happy ending, except the tailpipe on the town car was completely smashed. And then I looked at that car a little closer and I realized it was my rental car. And so after the race, that's the car I had to take back. And boy, man, let me tell you, I dropped that thing off and I was out of there in a hurry. But Mickey and Trudy were always very generous to us. One of the problems with passion is, it can be a great motivator, but it can also lead to hurt feelings and hard times and poor decisions. And so, nobody really truly knows what happened with Mickey and Trudy. I just know that it was a terrible tragedy. And for anybody that doesn't know, they were gunned down in their driveway in the 80s. And so that was a sad end to a remarkable chapter. And I just know that they were always good to me, and he really cared about the racers.
Right.
I remember him really caring about the people and, putting on a good show. And like I said, that goes back to that deep respect for anybody who attempts to do anything on that scale. You, Dave Cole, Jeff Knoll, Sal Fish, Roger Norman, all the people, whoever sticks their neck out there to put something on so that the rest of us can experience it either as a competitor or a participant or a spectator. There is no reason to do that from a financial standpoint, from a sanity standpoint. And that truly goes back to special place in heaven that most of the time, unfortunately, feels like hell. So, much respect to all of you who do that. And thank you.
You're welcome. And everybody else, all of us that do these kind of events and like you say, risk it, we'll probably all end up in bench racing somewhere up in the clouds, and then telling all of our own stories on what happened. And even though the players will be different and the situations might be a little different, happening in Mexico or LA or Reno, that there'll be a lot of things that happened because of the people that we put ourselves around. And it's those people that why we do it. So, and you're one of those.
Well, thank you. And everybody can participate. When I get stuck, I ask myself, when I don't know what to do, I say, well, what can I do? And when I don't know, I say, well, what do I know? And one of my things that sticks out in my mind, and I'll tell you this, just these small acts of kindness and these small things that make a difference. I remember after a big race at Prairie City, were we at Prairie City? Anyway, a big Ultra 4 race at Prairie City. I was walking through the pits, and I was walking past Lauren Healy's pit, and Lauren Healy himself is out picking up trash. And it probably wasn't even trash from his team or his pit, but he was cleaning up the area and picking up the trash himself personally, to just because it's the right thing to do. Those small acts of kindness. When I'm on the trail, my husband gets kind of tired of it, I'm sure, but I'm always hopping out to pick up trash, and take it back with me. Or in my kayak, I have a grabby thingy that I pick stuff up out of the water. Or, I don't want anybody to ever underestimate their ability to make a difference. They might not be interviewed by you or be someone who's perceived as a leader in the industry, but everybody's a leader in the industry. You just have to do what you can do. What can I do and what do I know? And so, say something. Somebody's driving in the sagebrush, tell them about tread lightly and stay the trail. If the gate's open, leave it open. If the gate's closed, close the gate. Pick up the trash. We had a big discussion on human waste the other day online because people just didn't get that the Rubicon is made of granite, and you put 500 rigs through there in a month with 1,000 people, and that stuff's not going anywhere. And, you need to pack it all in and pack it all out. And if we want to continue to enjoy, to love the places we love and do the things we do, those of us who can do it need to do it and be good examples and try to do our best. Yeah, there's circumstances and times when things are different. But if most of the people do the right thing most of the time, then we will really be able to be proud of ourselves and our community.
True. So true. So let's now jump in with both feet into the Offroad Motorsports Hall of Fame.
How about that?
Yes.
What an honor.
Absolutely. So when did you get started, and tell us the history behind the organization?
Sure. So the Offroad Motorsports Hall of Fame was started by Ed Perlman, one of the early innovators of off-road. And he is Mike Perlman of Nora's dad, another guy, Mike Perlman, who I want to give a shout out as a promoter. Ed Perlman thought that any good organization or any healthy sport needed a Hall of Fame, and so he came up with the concept. And then he passed the baton to Rod Hall, who picked up literally one box of stuff that was Ed had passed away, and Rod picked that up and brought it to Reno and had a dream of putting together a Hall of Fame and establishing a museum. And Rod did an exceptional job with that. And a lot of great people helped along the way. His daughter Shelby, Bob Bauer was one of the early directors. And so Mark McMillan is our current chairman. Mark is a remarkable human being on many levels. He's a successful business person. He's a philanthropist. He's a funny guy. If you ever get an invitation to one of his parties, he's generous. He's one of the most generous people I've ever met. He also happens to be a 5-time Baja 1000 champion. His dad, Corky McMillan, is in the Hall of Fame, and Mark is actually one of the 2 father and sons in the Hall of Fame. Mark is the son, Corky is his dad, and then the other father and son set that we have in the Hall of Fame is Bob Gordon and then Robbie Gordon. So those are the 2 father and sons. I started with the Hall of Fame 5 years ago. Apparently they were having a meeting in Reno, and Shelby was ready to go off and do other things, and they needed somebody to be the administrator. And apparently the board was in this meeting, and Dave Cole says, well, Barbara lives in Reno. Let's call her. And most of them didn't know me, but of course I had known Dave from Reno Rocks and King of the Hammers, and David actually called me previously and asked me to work for him in 2010 and asked me to come work for King of the Hammers and Hammer King. And I said no, because again, I still had children that were in school, and I felt like running off to join the circus. I had committed to saying I didn't have kids till I was older, and I said if I'm going to have them, I'm going to raise them, and I just didn't feel like I could go off and join the circus. And I remember with, nobody knows when I said no, nobody knows they asked, and nobody knows that I said no, and nobody was in the room when I had the big crocodile tears streaming down my face to have missed that opportunity. But again, there are the right thing will come along. And so there I was a few years later and got this call from Dave Cole, and he says, hey, I'm here with the Hall of Fame, and we want to interview you. And I'm like, I don't know if I need a job, and when? And he said, well, right now. When can you get here? I said, okay, I'll be right there. So I went to the Auto Museum, and there was this incredible group of off-road heroes, Rod Hall and Dick Landfield and Dave Cole and Mark McMillan, and and we talked, and one of them even said, I don't think she has time to do this, but I said, you know what, I believe in this, and I'd like to give it a chance. So I am a very part-time executive administrator. We have a fabulous board of 15 incredibly successful, powerful off-road people in the industry who love this sport. How the Hall of Fame works is we generally have an annual induction and awards ceremony. Anyone can nominate someone for the Hall of Fame. The only guideline is that the person must have been involved in the sport for 15 years. April is nomination month, so people can go online and fill out the nomination form. And then we have a committee of industry people from all over, rock sports, advocates, racing, all sections. And it used to be easier to get in the Hall of Fame because we didn't promote it and nobody really knew. So we would maybe have 10 or 12 nominations. Last year we had 54.
Wow.
Our bylaws used to say we could have between 3 and 5 people inducted per year. We did a bylaw change to reflect that, so now we can have between 3 and 7 inducted, but they still have to get votes from 2/3 of the committee. Hall of Fames are a narrow gate. It's not everybody gets a trophy. I just saw that the Baseball Hall of Fame will be inducting no one this year because no one got enough votes. So we're committed we have a process where we can have between 3 and 7. The committee meets, they discuss in person. Yeah, it's a very serious process. We lock these people in a room for a day, and then they do a blind vote, and then they keep refining that as much as necessary. And then they come up with the slate of proposed inductees for the year, and then that slate is reviewed and ratified by our board of directors. And I can tell you that at times it looks like sausage being made, because of all of the fabulous people who are nominated. Everybody has a story to tell, and they are amazing people. And just the way it works out, not everybody gets in, and sometimes that's hard. But you look at our class of 2020 that I want to recognize that hopefully, here's your inside scoop, if SEMA happens, we will be having our 2020 and 2021 combined induction ceremony on the Saturday before SEMA, which would be October 30th. And we would be inducting Bob Bauer and Dean Bullock, who we all know from the Iceman from rock crawling. Danny Fodrell, a fabricator, the great Jack Johnson, motorcycle racer, Roger Mears, of course, the great Roger Mears, Cal Wells III, the man behind the Toyota program, and a legacy inductee, Tom White, who did so much for our sport. So our class of 2020 will hopefully get inducted in Las Vegas before SEMA on October 30th, and we'll have the class of 2021 as well. So if anybody knows somebody that they'd like to nominate, don't hesitate to put in a packet. You can start now. We don't want a big, long story. Bullet points are better. We need to know why this person should be inducted into the Hall of Fame, just a little short bio, and why them and why this year. And one of the things we've been looking at is when we induct 7 people out of 54, to me, that doesn't decrease the contribution that those other people made. They just didn't quite get in. And so we're working on a program to build a registry to recognize everybody who's been involved in the sport and archive that at a major West Coast university in perpetuity. So anybody could document their history in the sport, and then that will be someone's job to caretake that forever. I believe that the guy who's down at Mike's Sky Ranch in Baja at 2 o'clock in the morning holding a gas can for a motorcycle rider that never shows up, you know, everybody has a Hall of Fame story, and I believe everybody deserves to tell it. So we're working on that program. We also have a great series of awards called our Impact Awards. That's where we look at the people who are doing great things now, the current generation, who's out there. And then our voting members of the Hall of Fame, which anybody can be a voting member of the Hall of Fame. It's $25 a year. You get to vote and decide who the voters' choice is. And so, for example, we didn't get to do our 2020 awards because of, Mr. COVID. But in 2019, we have Desert was Andy McMillan, Short Course was Kyle Leduc, Rock Sports was Lauren Healy, one of our favorites. Moto, ATV, UTV was Phil Blurton. Industry actually was Dave Cole. Advocate was Amy Granite. And so we give those awards out every year and have people for those. And then we do our land use donation. We have a Never Give Up award. We have a volunteer award. So our goal as the Hall of Fame is to be sure to tell the story of the people, places, events, businesses, and organizations who've been around and whose stories are worth telling and preserving.
That's awesome. And if COVID this year does not screw up SEMA, Shelley and I will definitely be at the award ceremony. We've enjoyed that over the last, it's been 8 years, I think, that we've participated in that. And it's been really cool. It really has. It's
an amazing event. And thankfully, the last 2 years, our amazing hostess, Charlene Bauer, has streamed the cocktail party on Facebook Live. And people can see what goes on there. We usually have about 600 people in attendance. We do a silent live auction that people can donate and bid on online. That's our major fundraiser for the year is our auction and the induction ceremony. And so to not have that last year, we have built the organization to a point with Mark's leadership and the board of directors and my tight purse strings that we are very financially sound. But we have big plans and we need to be able to execute those. The nonprofit world is kind of interesting. We're a nonprofit, but we're not a charity. And so it's very difficult. People, you can rely on volunteers for some things, but let's face it, everybody's busy. And so we really need to be able to pay for the expertise that we need. For example, we have 100 boxes of material that were donated to us by Judy Smith. The history of the sport is in those boxes. But we need someone who has archival experience, an archivist, and it's a tedious job. So you need to pay someone to go through and catalog that material and to do the digitizing on it. And that costs a lot of money. And so we are looking to the people who love the sport and the industry and the enthusiasts and the business community to support the Hall of Fame so that we have the financial resources to do the jobs we need to do properly and not rely on volunteers. We have a program we're starting with heritage clubs and events. We will be going out and recognizing any club or business that is part of the heritage of the sport. We're kind of looking at the Hall of Fame in two segments. We're looking at the first 50 years as our first calling that Rod Hall left us and tasked us with documenting the history of the sport. And that requires a lot of digitizing of photos, materials, programs, and, digging into the history and making sure the history of the sport is documented, but then looking ahead to the next 50 years and beyond and building a sustainable program where every year the history of the sport kind of writes itself through whatever processes we put in place, and then that's documented and archived at the university, and that just builds and builds and builds in perpetuity. For example, what were the hot trends in off-road this year? What vehicles, what were the standout vehicles? And that would be participation across the board. We'll do surveys and do stuff on social media and ask people, what was your top headline in off-road this year? Was it electric vehicles? What was the standout thing in 2021? Was 2020, was it, Lucas Oil, the end of that great campaign? What things happened in the sport in any year that we all think we'll remember, and then you and I can't even remember what year we did something 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
Exactly.
So we have this two-prong approach to taking the past and making sure we get that done. I have a pressing just feeling that we have got to get more interviews like you're doing with me with the greats of that first generation of our sport before they're gone, before they can't tell their story the way they want it told. So you should be talking to somebody 20 years older than me next week. Please.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yep, you're right.
That's what we got to do. We got to grab that stuff while we can get it. We want people, when they're cleaning out their dad's garage in Long Beach and they come across a bunch of old pictures, don't throw them out. Send them to the Hall of Fame. Make a donation so that we can make sure that they're preserved and archived and that your loved ones and your friends are always remembered. Tribute pages we're starting a tribute, section where you can remember people, because what I see with the Hall of Fame too is some people will nominate someone for the Hall of Fame and they're an amazing person and a great human being and a great racer or recreation person. Are they a Hall of Famer? They are to me and to the family member, but they don't meet the parameters, but yet their story is still important and should be recognized and their contributions honored. So through these tribute pages, we'll be able to have everyone recognized and archived. We're kind of going to make Wikipedia meets the Yellow Pages, where everybody can tell their story. So other than that, I don't have any plans.
That's great. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that's a goal and a plan to happen.
Yes, and the other thing we had happen last year that was another thing that was quite a blow is our vehicle collection at Terrible's in Jean, Nevada was very popular and was building into quite a nice attraction. And the pandemic closed the casino, and it was closed for 3 months, and then they informed us that they weren't going to reopen it. So we had to dismantle our collection of vehicles, which was just one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because again, you have a dream, you build something, and then to have to take it apart and then be determined to rebuild it again. So we had all of the people who had their vehicles on loan come and pick their vehicles up. I'm very proud that all of the vehicles were safely returned to their owners that were owned by outside vehicles. The Hall of Fame owns a few really cool vehicles, And we had left those in the facility to try to figure out where to put them next. And in the meantime, they had a water leak and the ceiling collapsed on top of our Herman buoy buggy.
Oh, Jesus.
And so then, mind you, it's 116 degrees in Vegas in the summertime, and now you're in a casino that the ceiling has fallen down because the water pipe broke. So the floors are covered with water. There's no lights. It's 90 some degrees inside. And we had to wait for them to shore the ceiling up so we could go get our other vehicles out. And then they were able to determine it was safe, and they were able to extricate the buggy. And so the buggy, thank you to Gary Hawley, amazingly, it was repaired and didn't sustain too much damage. It looked pretty disastrous, but it turned out okay. And none of the other vehicles were damaged. But we had to find homes for all of our vehicles. So we have the Walker Evans Parnelli Jones truck is at the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in Daytona Speedway in Florida. We have Scoop Vessel's Class 8 truck and the Norton Nova, which I adore. I adore them all. They are at the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles. We were just gifted the gift of a lifetime. I literally cried. I cry a lot. Cameron Theriot donated us the BFG Bronco. We have not picked that vehicle up yet. We don't have a new location. We have the Fusting Class 8 truck. Mark Fusting and his wife generously donated that vehicle to us. We have Rod Hall's Flag Hummer, which will be going into the National Automobile Museum in Reno. And we have Mickey Thompson's course marking buggy. And then the Herman buoy buggy, after it was restored, is now on display at a sand shop in Arizona. So all of the things you thought you'd be doing in 2020, you are basically doing your damnedest just to, kind of reel things in and make sure that the assets are taken care of and respected, because people have entrusted us with these pieces of off-road history. And with that privilege of having these vehicles now, there becomes an additional responsibility to the Hall of Fame, which is expensive to maintain all of these vehicles. Some of them run, some of them don't. The ones that do, we need to make sure that they're maintained properly. So that all costs money. And so, we're looking to the business community and to individuals to help us support these vehicles and sponsor the vehicles and their care. And so we'll be looking ahead to that. We're looking for a new location in hopefully the Las Vegas area. And we will rebuild and we will be back, because we heard loud and clear that that's an important part of the Hall of Fame. If people get a chance, they can go to our YouTube channel, ORMHOF's YouTube channel, and you can watch some of the videos that we shot at the museum. There's a great story of inductee Larry Miner talking about the buoy buggy. There's a great video from the CJ5 of Pat and Lauren Upton, who went around the world in the Guinness Book of World Records setting around the world in a CJ5. And there's a video there about that. So those are the types of things that the Hall of Fame believes are important. And we hope the other people who believe they're important will support the Hall of Fame, either join, partner, donate. All the information's on the website at ormhof.org.
Well, I believe in the organization, and I hope that all of our listeners do as well. I'd really like to see more rock sports involved and more of the people that have made the history in rock sports, or have worked in off-road, the rock crawling, four-wheel drive end of off-road, to give us our history, be active in it, because the more that are active, the more the people that were active and have made the history will be recognized in the Hall of Fame. And so we really hope, that there's a bunch of us that that want to see that side grow. And I'm hoping that we get all these young guys that are in the off-road four-wheel drive side of it involved with ORMHOF, so the legacy in the rock sports. I mean, we're only 22, 23 years old with the rock sports in the competitive side, as opposed to the off-road racing with over 50 years of history, that, we can build our side of the sports history as well. So everybody that listens to this, get involved with ORMHOF somehow.
And like Rod Hall said, it's not the Off-Road Racing Hall of Fame. It's the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. And he believed in that inclusivity. And, for those of us that have been around the rock sports side, it's kind of funny to, not funny, but it's interesting to watch the maturity of the sport, I guess, to the point that we're even talking about Hall of Famers. Shannon Campbell was the first rock sports person to be inducted in the Hall of Fame, and then we will be honoring Dean Bullock this year, hopefully. And by the way, tickets will be available once we know we're going to be a go. Right now in Vegas, you can't even have a group of more than 50 people. So once we know we're a go, the tickets are available. But one of the great things is it's open to anybody to come, so they could come too. But rock sports, I'll never forget, I was sitting at a show, and I was across from Jesse Haynes in his booth, and he was playing the old videotapes.
Right.
What were the early the CDs of the rock crawling events, like You Rock and all of those?
Hollin' and Crawlin'.
Yeah, Hollin' and Crawlin'. So Jesse's got those Hollin' and Crawlin' tapes on, and he's like voiceovering them. He's talking about, oh yeah, and that vehicle and this vehicle, and that's Tiny and John Nelson and this and that. And I thought, man, that's something we need to do, is go back to those old. They're brand new compared to things in a timeline, but
yes,
we need to go back and capture all of that. And like we say, everybody thinks we'll always remember, and we don't. So those are the types of things that a Hall of Fame, a healthy and properly funded Hall of Fame, can have resources to do, and we hope to be doing a lot more of that. So,
well, I want to encourage everybody, all of our listeners, and anybody that's involved in off-road and rock crawling and four-wheel drive and overlanding and anything to do with getting off the pavement, to get involved with ORMHOF, the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. And even if it's just becoming a voting member, if it's buying some, a hat or some stickers or whatever's available, helping out somehow with the organization to capture that history, because in another 50 years, none of us are going to remember what happened yesterday. So, Barbara, I want to thank you so very much for coming on board and discussing your life and your history and how people can get involved with ORMHOF and the history of our motorsports off-road. And it's been absolute pleasure having you on today, but more than that, for having known you, even though it's a short period of time, it seems like it's been forever. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Rich, and what you and Shelley do. As you know, we're friends, and we're comrades, and you know that we are always there for you. David's always up on the hill with the CJ6, the winch ready to go, and I'll do anything you need to help make what you do successful. And we're looking ahead to a successful future for the Hall of Fame, to ask everyone to help contribute and do their part in whatever way they feel makes a difference in their heart for the sport of off-road.
100%. Again, thank you.
All right, my pleasure.
Okay, we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.